Hey, we are at the Laura Ingalls Museum in Pepin, Wisconsin. So there's some really neat tools here just to start out the show. They have a large cast iron kettle, which is what they would have talked about making maple syrup in. They probably used it for butchering, and they used it for apple butter. There's tools like meat saw, meat hooks, skinning knives. That's part of a plow. Gotta turn it sideways, but yeah. Leather work tools. There's a yoke of for oxen, and you read about in Farmer Boy how he made one of those. A lot of different tools. A sickle. I love the cradle, which you can't hardly see, but that's a tool for harvesting grain. And the bottom knife blade is like a sickle, and it cuts the grain, and then these fingers hold it up and make it into, like, gather up a huge amount of grain in one time so you can make a sheaf of grain. If you have more questions about any given tool and how it's used, put it in the comments. This is a plow here. Horseshoes, horseshoe hammers. I'll try to answer any of your questions. We got mallets, draw knives. I used a draw knife when I was trying to make some stuff for my homestead back in 2020. Broad axe. Chisels are cool. Here's some hand hewn. This is an actual dovetail joint. You can see how they did it. So I know we've shown some log cabins on the channel with these beautiful dovetail joints on old cabins. Here you can actually see how the hand hewn timber looks. This is a whetstone. This is for sharpening tools. We have a double-bitted axe in our new homestead, just laying in the barn. Bow saw, two-man saw, one or two-man crosscut saw. I have one of those, but this one looks nicer. Okay, the actual cradle that some of the people in the story would have slept in. We talk about the different Ingalls family. One of the more interesting events in the story, Little House in the Big Woods, was when they came out with their little tiny lamp and they saw in their pasture an animal. They hid it. They thought it was a cow. It wasn't supposed to be out in the pasture, but it was supposed to be in the barn that winter. It was actually a bear, and somehow it didn't hurt them. We've got up the ladder. They stored pumpkins, onions, hot peppers, sausages, and apples in their loft. And they had fresh produce sometimes. They wouldn't have had sinks back then, so they would have like a sink bowl, and you'd have to carry out in and out the water each day. It'd be what they call a dry sink. And there's some kitchen utensils. Rolling pin. I don't know why it has it's not a flat rolling pin. Tell me in the comments if you know. My mom had one of these when I was a child. Sifter, because flour used to not come pre-sifted like it does now. And there's an old wood stove. I don't think they had a wood stove in Little House in the Big Woods. But these are interesting to cook on. I have cooked on one of these before and burnt the carpet too. Oh, this tool, this grinder is a coffee grinder, but during a long winter they actually had to grind all their flour through that because the town they were in didn't have a grist mill yet. And so when they had grain, ooh, what's that?
A butter maker.
That's a butter churn. That's how they made the butter, is pushing that rod up and down until the cream turned into butter. Cast iron pans are fun. This is more like the stoves described in the book. This is an iron that you'd use when you were trying to iron your clothing. You'd heat them on the stove and then switch out the handle for different ones. Alright, here is a spinning wheel. I think they talk about them in Farmer Boy. There was spinning, there was winding the yarn, there was carding the wool. Well, I'm probably not supposed to touch that, but this is actually uncut wool. That's one of the shears they might have used. Carding benches. Here's a loom. That was really fun to see how it works, but this is how you make thread. You have a warp beam, and then you weave the other fabric through, or the other yarn. And I'm not super expert on how you do this, but it makes fabric when you do. I got children's clothing, hair bows. I think they made those out of something special like whalebone or something, but I'm not sure, so don't quote me on that. What is this? A sock knitting machine. You turn this crank and it knits a sock. That sounds amazing. And here's some of the old shoes. There's some snowshoes that people would have worn. They often trapped hides, and so that's not a full bearskin. A bearskin would take up this whole wall. But then there's rabbit, muskrat, beaver. And so it talks about Pa gathering up, trapping furs all winter and then using that to trade for pay. Here is a covered wagon. And there's some of the things in there, a spinning wheel, a miniature stove. Here's like a part of it. So fishing was an important part of Pepin's history, where they caught fish in the river and used them for eating and selling. And the ice industry. They got ice saws. This very, very long saw here that doesn't even tell us what it is. Ice tongs. But, and different ice tools. And they talk about how you do home ice delivery. They use a 2-man crosscut saw for those too. And different types of PVs and cant hooks to move logs and ice. And there is a real scale. Put something on that and weigh it, and you gotta know how to work these levers or these weights up here, and you'll figure out the weight of something. There's a really old sewing machine. And it talks about in the books Laura getting one of these and using it and working at a place. I don't know what that is. Adding machine. Old calendar from 1938. An advertisement for a 1-cent sale. What a 1-cent sale is. And this is an old washing machine, so there's probably a belt drives this, maybe a hand driven, I don't know, but then gears control the agitator, and then you have a thing that squeezes out the water. You crank that by hand, get the water out of it. A wringer. Then you can put your clothes basket right here, and you would have the clothes fall out of that after they came through the wringer. And you get most of the water out of that, so then they're easier to dry. Here's some really old versions of the Little House in the Big Woods, Farmer Boy, The Long Winter, and some of our other books. I almost missed this. It's right below the calendar and above the adding machines. I just zoomed by it. But this is an old phone. And to use it, you'd have to crank that, and you'd talk into one of these and listen in the other.
In this one, and you listen to that one.
Okay, and I don't know how to work that machine, but it'd be pretty cool. Here's some of the traps they used for trapping all these beaver and muskrat. And there's the book, The Little House in the Big Woods. And all of this is at the Laura Ingalls Wilder Museum and Gift Shop in Pepin, Wisconsin. And her birthplace log cabin is about 10 miles away, so we're going to go there next and hopefully make a video about that. Hope to see you there.